The way we keep time reveals something about what's important to us or what we center our lives on. Not only does it reveal it, but it also has a way of reinforcing who and what is important to us. That's what we looked at this past Sunday in our ongoing Adult Forum series, Worship Wise, as we took a look at the structure we call the church year, the liturgical year. And again, this can sound like inside baseball to people who are like, I'm just barely aware of the Bible itself or I know a handful of stories about Jesus. Why would I need to know about seasons like Advent or Lent and why there are certain colors or certain days and festivals? All that sounds like that's a bunch of extra hoopla. And at one level, it's worth saying, yes, these are later inventions. These are constructs that Christians have come up with over centuries. They're not commanded by God. There's no rule from Jesus. You must have 4 candles on an Advent wreath or 7 candles on an Advent wreath in an earlier time when it was 7 weeks long. There's no rule from Jesus that you have to observe festivals like the Transfiguration or the Ascension. There's no rules from Jesus about not eating meat on Fridays in Lent either. These are things that we have developed as practices over the years, but it's worth recognizing that the way we keep time, including the pattern of the year's cycle, as well as every Sunday within it, are part of the ways that Christians recenter ourselves on the story of Jesus. Here's what I mean when I say that what we center our lives on, what we keep time with, says something about who or what matters to us. The ancient Romans, for example, named their months, some of them after some of their gods. January is named for the Roman god Janus. March is named for the Roman god Mars. And when Caesars and emperors came along, they wanted to get in on the game too. So we have July and August in our calendar because they were months named for Emperor Julius Caesar and Emperor Augustus Caesar, right? This is sort of a thing that emperors and empires do. They want to say to their subjects, I control everything in the world to revolve around me and our government, our empire. So even the names of units of time get stamped with kings and kingdoms. Throughout an awful lot of ancient history, the way you marked what year it wasn't some standard common era sort of designation, but the whateverth year of so-and-so the king who was on the throne. Kings wanted to mark time in terms of their reign, their power, as a way of saying, I'm so important, we should start time over again because I'm on the throne and recounting the years that I've been in charge. So this is the kind of thing empires do all the time. For the church to come along and say, no, it's not Caesar who's most important, and no, we're not going to mark time naming it after the gods of Rome or Greece. We'll mark time by the story of Jesus, was a way of saying we are willing to live out of step with the wider culture. There's always something a little bit weird about Christian timekeeping, and to sort of own that, to lean into that we are people both who look to the ancient past and the stories of God and the people of Israel. We're also people who lean forward into the promise that God has begun a new thing, that the new era, the new creation, and the new covenant have begun, and that we live in the overlap of both of them. That's ways of saying that Jesus defines our understanding of time differently. So, it's the choice of Christians that observe something like a church year to intentionally build structures in our calendar that help us to be centered in the story of Jesus. And so, much of what we do throughout the course of the year on Sundays here is a way of tracing the story of Jesus every year, so that at the very least, even if the sermons are all terrible and the hymns don't work, at the very least, we're getting the story of Jesus every year in a slightly different way. Every year, the church's year begins ahead of the wider secular calendar because we start with a season of Advent that usually starts either at the end of November or beginning of December with 4 Sundays, at least in our practice, that prepare us for the coming of Jesus' birth. And we celebrate the birth of Jesus in Christmas, which lasts 12 whole days long. It's another great way we are intentionally out of step with the world, right? The rest of the world wants to start singing Christmas songs on November 30th, and we're like, no, we're not there yet. It's preparation, it's Advent. And on December 26th, the rest of the world has left Christmas behind, and we're like, no, it's just getting started. It's 12 whole days long. And then we move to this season of Jesus being revealed to the world, the season of Epiphany, that begins with that famous story of the wise men, the Magi following the star to meet the Christ child, but a whole bunch of other stories about God being revealed in Jesus, his first calling of disciples, and him first being revealed as this amazing instrument of God when he turns water into wine, him being baptized. These are stories we hear year by year in this season in the church's year, which sort of culminates in this really important moment of revealing Jesus and God's glory when Jesus goes up on the mountaintop on what we call Transfiguration Day. That moves us then to this season that prepares us for the other important pillar of the story of Jesus' death and resurrection. So Lent is this whole season of 40 days that's meant to prepare us walking that wilderness journey into the cross and resurrection, which is what Holy Week and then Easter is all about. Easter takes 7 weeks in the church's calendar. Again, it's not just a single day and then the cellophane grass and chocolate eggs and bunnies are on discount. For us, it's 7 weeks because it takes a bunch of different stories and moments and time to process. What does it mean that death's power has been broken in Jesus? All that leads up to the story of Pentecost, 50 days after Easter, because Pentecost was already a Jewish festival that came 50 days after Passover, because Jesus' death is at Passover. 50 days after that is the Jewish festival of Pentecost. That becomes the day when all these people are gathered in the city of Jerusalem and the Holy Spirit is poured out and everybody speaks and can hear in different languages. That moment that something changes and the followers of Jesus are filled with the Holy Spirit, that becomes this other important festival observation in the church's year. The whole rest of our church's year, basically the summer and into the fall, is mostly then returning to the story of Jesus. And basically in the course of our year, if we've hit highlights of the birth of Jesus, the beginnings of Jesus' ministry, and then the cross and resurrection, moving from Advent up through Easter, all throughout the summer in Sundays that we call ordinary time, which just means counting time, second, third, fourth Sunday after Pentecost. That doesn't mean boring or dull, not in that sense of ordinary, it just means counting. But all throughout the summer and fall, we then go back into the Gospels and mostly, with some exceptions, but mostly trace through one of the Gospels in the course of a year to sort of follow along with the disciples and Jesus, getting to know Jesus, hearing what Jesus says, watching what Jesus does, and being shaped by it. So that, again, by the course of a whole year, we've been immersed, like we're going on the journey of being Jesus' disciples as well. That's the idea, that every year, people in a congregation that follows the liturgical year both hear why Jesus is different and why he matters. That he's the Son of God who's God incarnate in his birth. He's the one who dies and rises for us at Easter and fills us with the Holy Spirit in Pentecost. And then we get to know this Jesus more deeply in the day-to-day conversations he has walking on the roads of Palestine and sitting at tables with tax collectors and doing miracles, feeding the crowds by the seashore. All those things are a part of our annual tradition. And it's a way for us of saying, regardless of how the rest of the world is keeping time, we choose to center our lives on the story of Jesus, to let that shape us. And again, so that we don't end up getting swept up the next time a Caesar wants to stamp his name on something like July and August, end up getting stamped with the name of emperor. We end up being shaped intentionally by the story of Jesus. That's one of the gifts of the church's year. We hope you'll join us one more time this coming Sunday as one final time we take a look at Worship Wise, and that you can join us also by these video sessions as well. See you along the way.